Hey, this is Jim Cranston from 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com, the podcast website about reimagining your life. Thank you for joining me today to talk about, well, more about SMART goals. If you like what you hear today, please leave a like, subscribe, tell your friends, send me a message. So I come in my winter clothes again. I just realized my voice is going away. I'm working in New Hampshire right now, and we had snow today and yesterday, so spring isn't quite here yet. But welcome back to our continuing discussion about SMART goals. Remember, SMART, SMART goals. We've been working our way through each letter of the SMART acronym and talking about what each part means and how it continues. That it gives you a kind of a template for creating goals that really actually work for you, things that are truly important to you. So a quick reminder of what we already covered. We started with the S in SMART, you may remember, which stands for specific, making sure your goals are clearly defined rather than vague goals. And then we covered the M for measurable, which is creating ways to track your progress so you see how far you've come and kind of keep yourself motivated as you do things. Then last week we talked about A for achievable or actionable, and those ensure that your goals are both realistic, so it's something you actually can achieve, and then but something that's actionable, so it's something tangible that you really can do. And then tonight we're going to be talking about the R of SMART, which stands for relevant goals or reach goals. And those both two aspects that kind of complement each other in important ways. So we'll get started with relevant in a second. I just realized I forgot to say we're still traveling, like I mentioned. So we're still doing a hotel, different room, different background. We have a beautiful hotel multi-panel mural. So thank you to Homewood Hotels, Hilton property. They have a full-size refrigerator and a stove. It gets no better than that when you're traveling. So back to our goals. And like I said, we're going to start with relevant. And a relevant goal matters, is something that matters to you personally. And it aligns with your broader life vision, your values, and your current circumstances, which is actually pretty important. It's not just something that sounds good or someone else told you was good. It's really something that generally fits into your own life vision, which is really important. When you're reimagining your life for whatever reason, relevance becomes incredibly important because this is really about intentionality and mindfulness in yourself. And it's about making conscious choices rather than just kind of drifting along or following someone else's ideas of what they consider to be a perfect life and kind of trying to apply it to you. And it just reminds me of something that when I used to talk about being in business for myself or starting a business, I worked for myself on and off, mostly on for a very long time now. Every time you say, oh yeah, I work for myself, everyone always has a great idea. You know what you should do to make a bunch of money? You should do this or that or whatever. And of course, the natural question back to that is, if it's so great, why aren't you doing it? And it's because people are always very quick to give advice to other people. And if you're not doing the work, anything seems very easy. So when you're doing your own goals, remember that it's really important that the goal has to be relevant to your vision of your life. So it's an important piece to keep in mind. And it's, how do you know that a goal is truly relevant? And it's kind of simple, but it can kind of sneak by. But there's a couple of questions you can ask yourself. First, does the goal align with your values and the things that matter to you? If one of the things that you really value is family connections, for instance, then, if that's the most important thing in your life, and you're also thinking of starting a business, but it's going to require 60, 80-hour work weeks for a few months, maybe a year, something like that. Well, maybe that the goal of starting a business isn't really aligned with your goal of having a really strong family life. Maybe you have to kind of work it around a little bit and find a better way to get those two goals to align. And if you're kind of a creative person, another example that often comes to mind, but your goal is, really think about financial gain. And the reality is, I know a number of people who work in the arts, and a lot of them are successful, but I wouldn't say that they're all millionaires. And if you're going to be a millionaire, well, that's really turns more into a business side of thing. And if you want to go into the creative side of things because you don't like business, but you want to be very wealthy, there's kind of a disconnect there between those two goals. And some people manage to merge it, but it's very difficult because it kind of takes both sides of your mind to make those things work together. Excuse me. So as always, like I said, your goals have to work together to be successful in moving you towards your bigger goals and your life vision. So third, this is the second thing rather, is your goals really have to support all your other goals. If you have goals that conflict, like we said, you want to be good at business, but don't want to be a business person to be an independent operator. Those are kind of conflicting goals, and you have to find some way to merge them so that they live happily together. And otherwise, I don't know if you've ever been in this situation where you have conflicting ideas about something, or somebody else. If I do this on project work, I get in this situation quite often. Somebody will want something done in a particular fashion. They want it done very quickly, but on the other hand, they want it done, with painstaking detail. It's kind of like those are kind of conflicting goals. You need it done. Maybe you need it done by tomorrow, but you also want all this painstaking detail, which takes time. So you have to learn how to balance goals, and that includes even your own personal goals. And third, the goal has to be appropriate for your current life stage. I know a lot of what we talk about is retirement and what you do in retirement, and it's things that are relevant to you in your 30s and your 40s and your 50s. They're different than when you get to be in your 60s and 70s and you're looking more towards retirement. It's fun to travel when you're younger, but you're traveling usually with a different purpose and a different view towards the world. As you get older, things that you might have thought either were boring or just not interesting or whatever suddenly become very interesting. I was actually kind of laughing at myself the other day because where I'm located, there's a little park around the corner, which is really neat. And it's actually a very cute little park. It's right on the edge of a lake. It's very pretty. But there's a little cemetery there. And I'm not a huge one for just historical things, but it turns out that the park is named after the family that had founded this whole section of town. And so it was interesting looking back and reading through the different people who were involved in the time frames in the early 1800s, late 1700s, when they were active in the area. And they had a little map where the gravestones were and stuff. And I thought, 20 years ago, I remember, in different circumstances, going to cemeteries for various reasons and thinking and seeing people in cemeteries looking at things. And at the time, I just didn't appreciate the historical perspective that you get by looking back 100 or 200 or more years when you look at these older cemeteries. One thing is just the average lifespan is extremely short. And the other was the size of the families tended to be much larger. And the groupings of the families were different. And the whole thing was just kind of fascinating. It made me laugh how much things have changed in my perspective over the past 20 years. So the goal has to be relevant to where you are at your current age, or at least current interest level, in order to be a relevant goal to you. And, the other piece of it is that doesn't mean that as you get older, you shouldn't look after a goal that you found interesting when you were younger, or if you're younger now, that you shouldn't be interested in something if you think is something old people do. The real thing is you're your own person. And so you have to set your goals that are relevant to yourself. And if that doesn't match what society expects of you, so be it. If you want to be 25 and interested in history and historical things, that's fantastic. If your friends aren't, then probably you have other decisions to make. But you have to follow your life for things that matter to you first, or else your goals won't motivate you. We'll talk about that in a second. So relevance, relevance in your life shifts for a lot of reasons. Part of it is age, part of it is life stage, part of it's where you live. All these things had an impact upon the relevance of a goal. So that's why it's very personal. And it's so important that you work to develop goals that matter directly to you and not what society says is a goal. You see a lot of people, especially on social media, talking about, oh, we're going to Disney World, we're going to Disneyland, whatever. That's great for them. There's nothing wrong with that. More power to them. Disney loves them. But if that's not what you're interested in, and if that's not what you want for your family or your grandkids, whatever, don't think that you have to change your goals to match society's expectations. Your goals are your goals. You're your own person. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. So the other aspect of the R in SMART goals is reach. And this one is kind of interesting. You want your goals to be something that matters to you. Obviously, that's the relevant part. But you also want goals to be a little bit hard to actually attain, because if they're trivial to attain, it's kind of like, well, my goal is to walk over to the refrigerator and get a cookie. Fine goal, nothing wrong with it, kind of a little short term. But when you're done doing that, it's not like you say, wow, I can't believe I walked to the refrigerator and got a cookie. But if your goal is to say, I just went through this actually this past weekend, to walk up to a bunch of people who you don't know in a new church that you've never been in before, speaking fairly poor Spanish and explaining to them that you would like to sing with their choir, who looks to be very well rehearsed and professional, and then explaining that you recognize that fact, and so probably be more appropriate for you not to sing with them. You thank them very much for even entertaining and struggling through listening to you, because I was in a guest church because I'm traveling. 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, or actually now a little bit longer, 4 or 5 years ago, there's zero chance I would have ever thought of having done that. My Spanish is not good, because I don't practice enough, my fault entirely. But it's something that it takes you out of your comfort zone to do that. And I know if I don't try practicing with people and getting the words right and learning how to present myself, I'm never going to get better. And so that's a real stretch goal. And my goal still is to learn Spanish, and Scots Gaelic actually is why I started studying Spanish. But it seems like an impossible goal, but there were little steps along the way that, learn some grammar, learn how the language works, and learn pronunciation. And by doing that repeatedly, you can incrementally get to the goal that you want, a little bit at a time. So, the goal has to be achievable, obviously. And you might say, well, learning a language is not achievable. And I would say, well, could you learn the alphabet? And you'd probably say, yeah, I can probably learn the alphabet. And can you learn how to, say a couple things in the present tense? Hi, this is my name. Yeah, I could probably learn to say stuff like that. So then you start putting all those little pieces together and you realize, all those little goals do stack up to something pretty significant. But the big goal is still a reach goal. It's not a trivial goal. And when you reach any one of those little milestones, your brain goes, hey, we're getting a little closer to the big goal. That gives you a sense of achievement. That gives you motivation. That's what keeps you going on your journey, because you realize now, even though the goal seemed insurmountable, a month ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago, on some goals, now you see that you have made progress, and that's like super exciting to your brain, because your brain wants to do a couple of things. Remember, we talked about this a lot. Number one is keep you safe. Number two is keep you happy. And one of the ways you are happy is not by trying to find and be happy, but it's by achieving things. There's been studies on that. It shows that the people who are happiest are not the people who try to buy happy or do things that they thought would make them happy, but people who actually did things that caused them to have achievements. That happiness lasted much longer than the short-term happy things, like taking a trip somewhere. They were happy on the trip, but after the trip, they didn't feel particularly happy, versus having an achievement of getting yourself to a financial position where you could take a trip. The achievement was what made them most happy. The trip at that point was almost secondary. It's kind of interesting. We've talked about that before, and we're going to do another episode on it, because the whole study of happiness is fascinating into itself. But I digress, as I often do. So the goal should be achievable, and but it shouldn't be too easy, because if it's too easy, you don't get that sense of satisfaction that you get from the achievement. So you kind of think of it as that sweet spot between where a goal is just challenging enough to be exciting, because it is exciting to your brain when you do things, it makes it happy, but it's not so difficult that it becomes overwhelming. Because if you're too anxious about something, well, maybe then it becomes something negative. And you don't want the goal to be something negative. You want it to be something positive and motivating. So you may have to break it down into smaller steps, or you may have to modify your goal a little bit and take it, a little bit different approach to it. So that reach part of the goal is kind of a tricky one, in a sense, because you do want it to be a stretch goal, because that's what really keeps you motivated and keeps you going. But if it's too big, then you start to think, oh, I'll never do this. And all the negative self-talk starts, and you talk yourself out of doing it. So that one's a little bit tougher. That's probably the most difficult one of all the goals, is balancing that reach part of it with the relevant part of it. And it has to be something that's relevant, but what's relevant is impossible, then you're not going to get the results that you need anyway. So that's a balancing act, and it takes a little practice to get there. It's not that it's hard, but we tend to talk ourselves into really big goals. The classic New Year's resolution problem. You have your New Year's resolution, you make all these goals, they're humongous. I'm going to lose 1,000 pounds. I'm going to learn how to speak 6 languages. I'm never going to be late for work. I'm whatever. And you have all these goals, and your brain in the background is going, there's no way we can do this. And so you lose your motivation. So that's why they have to be attainable. So when we grow, we stretch ourselves, and that's kind of part of life. And it works in goal setting just as well. And we need to reach something kind of beyond our capabilities. That's what gives us a sense of satisfaction. And that growth process in and to itself is very rewarding for our brain, which of course, when our brain is happy, we're happy. So that's the power of setting goals with the right amount of both reach to kind of stretch you a little bit, and it's very important also to have relevance to your big long-term vision of life. Because as you grow into this, and it's kind of fun, you start to do something that seemed impossible, and you do it by little steps, and you work on it for a while, and all of a sudden you find out that kind of like, wow, I've been doing something now for a year. I forgot that it was ever difficult for me. And that really does happen. And that's the wonder of goal setting and just consistently working towards your goals, that things that you thought were impossible, maybe even months earlier, suddenly become routine. I'm going to try and get up before 7 o'clock, and you get up at 1:07. Kind of, oh, this sucks. And but you keep doing it, and all of a sudden one day, you're out walking the dog at 6 in the morning or something. You see one of your neighbors, you're talking to them, and you realize, man, I've been doing. I don't even think about getting up at 6 o'clock now. It's just that's how I start my day, and things become a habit when they're really part of a goal that's aligned with your vision of life. So, like we said, we want to reach a goal that's relevant, and the really magic point happens when you balance that. You're pushing yourself to grow, and you get places that you didn't think you're going to be able to get to before. And there are a few, like I said, there are a few challenges that can arise. One of them is, beware of the should goals. And we talked a little bit about this at the beginning, because should goals are the goals that other people think you should do, not what you should do. It could be societal pressure, it could be family exposure, social media, family expectations, social media, any of those things where someone else is expecting something of you, but your heart really has to be in it to be successful. And if you're not interested, then it's not going to work out for you. A lot of times you'll hear people say stuff like, I should learn to play golf. I should learn to play golf. Or, I should volunteer. Yeah, I should volunteer because some of my friends are doing it. And then you talk to them about it, and it's kind of like, are you interested in golf? Not really. Do you want to volunteer? No, actually, I don't like to be at the hospital. I don't like to be there. And it's kind of like, well, you're setting goals for yourself that aren't relevant to things that matter to you in your life. Maybe the person who's saying I should start golf is kind of like, maybe you should start going for a walk every day with your friends. Oh, I love seeing my friends. Like, well, then make that your goal. Well, but everybody I know is playing golf. Well, good, let them play golf. But you have a bunch of friends who walk, so focus on that. You got to make your goals relevant to yourself. Don't let other things or situations tell you what you should be doing. Secondly, make sure, like we said, make sure a goal isn't too easy. That really boils down to, we talked about this a lot in the past, that's your brain trying to keep you safe. It's I want to, I just use language because it's a long-term thing for me. I want to learn a language. Your brain's going, what do you want to learn a language for? In our case, English is fine. Like, I know, but I just want to learn a language. What happens if you forget English? And it starts coming up with all these reasons you shouldn't learn a language. What if you get an accent? That's just your brain who knows that you're concerned about trying to learn a language. And so it's trying to keep you safe. Remember, your brain doesn't want you to fail because it fears failure. Because in our original state, way back when, if you failed, it could mean that you didn't eat or, didn't get away from the animal that was chasing you or something like that. So that part of your brain is super active all the time, trying to keep you safe. So one of the offshoots of that is you tend to make goals that are really easy, and your brain kind of keeps talking it down a little bit. like, well, instead of trying to walk a mile, how about you like walk the stairs once? And it's just kind of like try to overcome that and appreciate your brain is doing what it's supposed to do, but also make your goals relevant and a little bit of a reach goal. And third, make sure the goals, you know, that they don't have too much reach. We talked about that in terms of New Year's goals. Um, if you set goals that are so ambitious that become intimidating, or reach way beyond your current capabilities, you're just going to become discouraged. You're going to become disappointed, and it's just going to be really bad. You're going to start the negative self-talk. Oh, I knew I couldn't do it. Excuse me, I never should have started this goal. Just balance what you can do with what you want to do. And that's true throughout life. It's just sometimes we forget that when we say, okay, I'm going to set a goal. And you set these humongous goals. Try and avoid doing that. Make little goals. And we talked about this before. If you fail at the goal, that's okay. It's a learning lesson. Then back up, look at the goal, see how you need to modify it, and change it to something that is still challenging, but is attainable. And now you've learned a lesson as well. So, as always, start by clarifying what your values are for your life and your vision for your life. We talk about that a lot. It's that's the real core of everything. And then generate your goals to support that vision. You know, what kind of life do you want to be living in a year, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, whatever. It doesn't matter what your time frame is. Look way down the line, look way in the future, see what you want to do, and then work backwards from there and say, okay, what steps do I have to take to get to that vision way into the future? And for each goal you set, ask yourself, right, does this goal really excite me? Is this something that does it align with what matters to me? Is it something that I get up and think about and go, wow, I just had another idea in that goal. That would be so cool if I did this or did it this way, whatever. That's a goal that has your real internal true attention to it. And that's something that'll automatically help you stay motivated and keep moving yourself forward. If that isn't happening to you, check and make sure that you're not doing a goal that you think you should be doing and one that's not really relevant to you. And the last one kind of, if the goal makes you a little nervous, you know, a little nervous is good because it means kind of like, oh boy, that's awful big. I wonder if I can do that. It means you're thinking about it, but you haven't said no. And what that really means is in the background, your brain is figuring out how to actually go through and implement that goal. And when your brain gets stuck on something, it kind of gets a little nervous in this thinking, just go with it. Don't let the nervousness stop you. Instead, think about what's making you nervous and to focus on it a little bit. It's kind of like, oh, I guess I'm really kind of concerned because I don't know how I'd ever get the money to fly out and surprise my friends in California. So I guess maybe the first part of that goal is I got to figure out how I'm going to get some extra money together so I can fly out and see my friends. Then don't fret on it. Don't your brain now has some direction. It will work on what you can do. So if remember, there's a lot of aspects to it. At some point, it seems like it's kind of nitpicking, but we're going to go, we have one more to do, which is next week, and then we're going to do a summary. And what you see, even though when taken in detail, it seems like there's a lot of steps to it. Once you do it a couple of times, it becomes just second nature. It's like anything else. It's one of the goals is learning how to form SMART goals, and there's a name for those sorts of things where they self-define themselves. And I don't remember the name, but the steps are important. Once the steps become familiar to you, it's very easy and you just go through it. You write a goal, it's effective. You know the traps, you're aware of them. If you start to fall into one, even though you know them, just back out, how to fix it. So it's actually pretty simple, even though we're going to spend a few weeks on it. And remember, because the whole point of SMART goals is to help you create goals that you want. It's not goals that society says you should have. It's not goals that social media says you should have. It's not goals that your mother-in-law says you or father-in-law says you should have, right? It's goals that you have defined for yourself that really and truly matter to yourself and bring you to live in alignment with your vision of life. It's super important that you become comfortable with that. Because when something really aligns with your vision of life and your own aspirations, then it'll resonate with you and you'll be excited about it, and motivation won't be a problem. And because you're doing what you want to do to make your life what you want to make your life become. And it's so many of our goals fail, especially New Year's resolutions, because they aren't things that really interested us in the first place. For some reason, we got ourselves talked into or caught up in going after those. Most important thing about SMART goals or any goals is they have to be consistent with your vision of life. And the other piece to remember is each piece of the SMART goal system, it's not magic, but each piece plays an important role because taken together, they give you a very simple framework where you can define the goal effectively, figure out if you're making progress on your goal and if the goal matters to you. And then finally, which we'll cover next week, is that we're going to take the goal and give it some sort of endpoint. And that's really important because if you don't have an endpoint, then it stops being a goal. It becomes kind of a way of life. And that's a whole different thing. That's a habit. And those are important too. And there's different techniques for habits. And we'll talk about that another time, another whole series. But the ability to do something and attain something and say that something is done and reward yourself for it. Remember, that's an important piece of any goal. To reward yourself at the end of it. That's very important because it closes the loop, as it were, in your brain. So your brain started to do something, it did something, it accomplished what it wanted to do, and now you have to tell it with the reward, yes, you did it, we reached our goal. And then the brain takes and hardwires that in. It's kind of like, if we do this process, we'll succeed and it will learn to do it automatically. And that's why it becomes easier. So as always, I mean, when combined with, the other aspects of SMART, specific, and sorry, I apologize, I mentioned this last week. I'm in a different circumstance right here, so my words are not near the camera, so I apologize for not looking at you the whole time. But the whole aspect of SMART goals is you have, specific, measurable, achievable, and then this week we just did relevant and reach, that's the R, and next week we're going to do time-based. And those things taken together give you this very simple and very robust framework for essentially turning your dreams into a reality, because everything starts with a dream. And at first the dream seems humongously big and impossible to reach. And this can work you right through it bit by bit. So that's it. Your homework for this week, take the goal you've been working on. Past 2 weeks, remember we said find a goal that you're gonna work on and try and fit into the SMART framework. And take that goal that you're currently working on and evaluate it for relevance and for reach. Now, ask yourself, does this goal really truly align with your values and what matters to you? Not somebody else's values, not what you think you should do, but something that really matters to you. And it may not be important to somebody else, but if it's important to you, that's what matters. Does it support your overall life vision? Also extremely important. And is this goal challenging enough to be exciting? But not so huge that it's overwhelming. Those two things have to kind of balance that a little bit in there. And if you answer no to any of those, probably you want to go back, look at the goal, tweak it up a little bit, and get it to the point where you can say yes to all those things. Not this, but then at that point, you probably have a pretty solid goal to be working towards and move you towards the life that you truly want to live. As always, please remember, thanks for joining us tonight. And remember, there's a lot of strife going on in the world right now. And stuff in Africa, there's a lot of places kind of a mess. It's really unfortunate. And so there's working in different system. We have ukr7.com. ukr7.com is a list of sites where you can support Ukraine in a lot of different ways. And then World Central Kitchen, worldcentralkitchen.org, wck.org. They support disasters throughout the world in varying ways, primarily with food. And I think I mentioned this a long time ago when we talked about Jose Andres. But one of the big things that the World Central Kitchen does is they try and use local supplies when they go into a disaster area. Most aid organizations just show up with everything they need, and it's basically a handout, which is better than nothing. I'm not criticizing that per se. It's just World Central Kitchen takes it a step further, and whenever they can, uses local supplies. So now they're not only just, in their case, usually feeding, or I think sometimes providing shelter or clothing, but primarily feeding the people, but they're also buying the goods locally when they can from the local people. So maybe things are a mess, but still, a lot of the businesses are able to make some amount of money because World Central Kitchen is buying the produce from them. They're buying the gas they're using to cook with the grills from them or something like that. So it has a very strong impact on the economy. Great organization, WCK.org, and again, UKR7.com to support the people of Ukraine. And we often talk about things, there are a lot of ways to help people. We talk that there's all these big national and international organizations, and those are great. But there's also a lot of local organizations, and they're helping people locally. Also great to get involved with them in any way that you can. Obviously you can't help everyone everywhere all the time. So pick a few things that are important to you and try and support them as you can. And even if you're in a position where you just, either financially or just mindset wise, you're not in a position to make donations or something, remember, it's always easy just to be pleasant to somebody. Just say, hi, how you doing? Hey, good morning. Those little tiny things, especially somebody's the kind of person that's feeling very alone at the moment or whatever, just somebody saying hi to them can change the whole day. And when you change somebody's outlook, especially in the morning, right, or at any time of the day, really, maybe they had a bad day and think nobody cares about me, and you're standing waiting to get in line. Hey, nice day, huh? And that's all you got to say. It's kind of like, wow, they took the time to talk to me. I guess I matter enough that a stranger will say hello to me. And for some people, that can be a really life-changing instant in life. So remember, one of the best ways to care for yourself, care for others, because it takes your vision from inside yourself to send you out into the world, and it really changes your perspective on life. So if you can and you're able, like say UKR7.com, links to places to support Ukraine, WCK.org, help people in areas of disasters, local organizations, or just make somebody's day a little nicer by just, a little bit brighter by saying hello, recognize them. It can make a more difference than you would normally even imagine. As always, thank you so much for stopping by. If you found something interesting and useful, please pass it along. Please subscribe, hit that like button, drop me a comment as to what you'd like to hear. Have a great week. Remember to live the life that you dreamed of, because that's the path to true contentment. Love and encouragement to everyone. See you next week on 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com. Thank you.